The education system in South Africa is failing too many of our children, denying them the right to a flourishing future. Crumbling infrastructure, overcrowded classrooms, and children having to cross rivers in some instances to make it to school are among the findings of Amnesty International's report into the state of education in South Africa. Joining me to unpack the findings and to test the veracity of the data is Amnesty International's media officer, Mienke Steytler, and of course also the Director of Communications at the Department of Basic Education, Mr. Mhlanga. Mienke, thank you so very much for joining us. Let's talk to your findings. Give us some of the key findings insofar as it speaks to, firstly, the kind of just physical infrastructure that the children have to contend with, the quality of the teaching that is happening, and why poor black schools are mostly affected.
So yes, we found that some of the schools that we visited had roofs that had been blown off in, say, 2014, but were still not fixed. We found, of course, many people are aware of the pit latrines, that many schools have pit latrines. 37 schools have no sanitation whatsoever. It's about 3,800 schools have pit latrines. What we have to make clear is these are schools, not the number of pit latrines, which sometimes we found people are confused with as well. In terms of teaching, we saw overcrowded classrooms. We saw teachers put under a lot of pressure. We also found that sometimes their training wasn't quite what it should be for them to be able to carry out their jobs. We found that the amount of time, the percentage of time that they spend teaching is quite a bit less than what you would see as an average in the world. And we also found that sometimes people who couldn't really afford it still had to pay a little bit of fees that we were hoping we would not see, and we found that it is still, you know, their socioeconomic background, the color of their skin, that affects what the quality of education is that they have, and that just made us a bit worried.
Okay, let me bring in the Education Department. Elijah, the findings of the report are quite damning. I spent the weekend going through it. The statistics in here are quite scary. I know that the department takes a dim view of some of the findings of this report. Do you agree with the veracity of this report insofar as it relates to the crumbling infrastructure, the quality of the teaching that is happening here, and also the fact that it affects mostly poor and black school children?
Well, maybe here's the first place that we need to start at. We have 13.9 million children in the basic education system, about 407,000 teachers who are in 9 provinces in 75 districts, and 889 circuits. We're just wondering how much of that the research went into to establish the facts for them to be able to, let me finish, to be able to make that conclusion that the system is broken. What we found in 1994 was a broken system of 19 different education systems in one country. And we worked as a government to unite that system into a single one. What we found was an unequal system, where the government then had actually legalized inequalities and saying that if you are black and poor, you will be banished to that poverty forever. And what we have sought to do since 94, 96, when the Schools Act and the Constitution came into place, was to make uniform all our resources, make sure that the funding and the resourcing, even the payment of...
With respect, Elijah, let me just pause you there. I want to bring up a slide on the methodology of how this information was conducted, because that is important, because this is a report that reflects on the colonial history of education and apartheid, but it talks to what the situation is now. I'm going to be asking my technical team to just put the slide up on the methodology, but whilst we're waiting for them, Mienke, take us through why it was was important for you to look at schools in the Eastern Cape, in Gauteng and in the Western Cape in terms of infrastructure, and who are the people that you spoke to? Talk us through the methodology of this report.
Yes, so we did. We visited those 3 provinces, and we spoke to 290 people in total. We spoke to teachers, union leaders, learners, school governing bodies. We did also, as part of the research, we partnered with the National Association of School Governing Bodies and did a survey. And we do hear, of course, what the government is saying, but we still feel that even if there's 1 or 2 schools or 37 schools that have no sanitation whatsoever, yes, that might be a very small amount in the big spiel of schools, but that is still 37 schools where learners are going every day and where they don't have anywhere to, go to the loo. And
now, let me bring you in, Elijah. In terms of the norms and standards, which, of course, you are a participatory signatory to and you've introduced, you are supposed to have dealt with certain issues, particularly around infrastructure. In terms of the report, it finds that you do not comply. Give us the reasons why you don't comply in terms of your own norms and standards.
Yes, and I'm glad you're saying it's our own. We're not a participant. It's something that we developed ourselves.
So why are you not meeting your own targets?
Yes, I'm coming to that. The problem is that you don't have a normal situation where you have all the money to solve all the problems all at once. You also have a situation where we have built many brand new schools all over the country, but as you're building them, some of the schools get damaged, others need maintenance. We also found that some of the schools, the provinces, were not budgeting for maintenance, instead focusing on building brand new schools.
Yeah.
Because that's been the pressure to say, if there's a school that's dilapidated, focus on building that school and neglecting in the process maintenance.
Let me ask you, Elijah, what power does the national department have in terms of provinces? Because this is also, education is something that has concurrent power. So the report, for example, found that an inordinate amount of schools don't even have a basic perimeter around the school to secure the safety of the learners, never mind the property and the tablets and other equipment that MECs are placing in the schools. It just physically can't protect children from people coming into the school and harming them.
Yeah, you're asking a good question because it is commonly misunderstood, the power that the minister has as well as the power of an MEC and a premier in a province. People confuse the two. And it's all in the Constitution. If we were to start there and read it, you'll see that the issue of concurrent powers is one of the challenges that are making...
But it's not a new challenge, Elijah. When is this going to change? Is it the view of the Department of Education that there shouldn't be concurrent power so that you actually have the ability to intervene directly, particularly in places like the Eastern Cape, in Gauteng, in Limpopo, where those basic things are simply not in place?
Yes, the minister has said so before. She says all we are a bank. The money comes through, 250 billion comes through DBE, and that money is gone to provinces. The provinces are supposed to deliver on this. And unfortunately, even MEC is not performing. It's the premier who should take action, not the minister, in terms of the law as we have it right now. But we have come up with certain initiatives that are aimed at assisting provinces, particularly when it comes to infrastructure. We have built 237 brand new schools from an initiative that was created by the Department of Basic Education to assist and accelerate the delivery of infrastructure in provinces. But that is not enough because provinces also need to push. But we also need parents and communities to maintain the schools. We always say that the schools are used Monday to Friday as a school. Saturday and Sunday, it's meeting places for funerals and church services and all these things. And some of the infrastructure is overused for 7 days non-stop, and some of it, you find that the desks are stolen and they're out there in community. So you can't blame education department alone. Okay,
Mienke, let's talk about the quality of the education now. Now, of course, one of the big issues is the quality of the training that teachers are receiving. Your report found quite a few anomalies. Pick out the most glaring ones that actually impact the quality of the education that children are receiving.
Two of the most glaring ones are reading and maths. So those are basic skills that one would hope that, especially at primary level, would have a foundation, right? So that people can take it forward if they would wish to into their high school years and then further to that. So we found that teachers were themselves not passing literacy tests and themselves not passing international standard mathematical tests, and that is worrying. But I just also want to say that, towards what Elijah was saying was we want to work with government. So yes, thank you for pointing it out. The report does talk about, of course, the history and the impact of history. And one can argue that it won't take 25 years to necessarily, get past all of those years that were awful. But how long are we going to wait for targets to be missed over and over and over again? And how many children still are going to fall victim to this? So we felt that the report was important because we want to actually make a call to government, but also there's other organizations like Section 27 and Equal Education that have worked on this issue for many, many, many years. And how can we all work together to help teachers to really lift up the teaching quality, and also to then impact the future lives of these young people who, one can argue, often come out of quite difficult circumstances anyway.
Elijah, the quality of teaching is affected by a number of things. It involves training, it involves resources, it involves language. One of the things that struck me in this report was the fact that often teachers who are expected to teach can't do so in the languages that they are required to teach. Now, of course, if you're teaching something like math and you want comprehension to take place, it's important that people be taught possibly in their mother tongue, so that the concept of what pi is in mathematics actually sticks. How do you do this when the teacher who is teaching a subject is not proficient in the language? The child who has to understand the concept don't understand the language. Isn't it time for a change?
Well, the teacher training function is one that is done by universities, so perhaps we should ask them what type of training they are giving to our teachers. But to complement...
But what is the directive from the Basic Education Department? Because this is a value chain. You're responsible for what kind of literacy rates and numeracy rates we have. Surely you have to have basic standards that you want tertiary institutions that are teaching, putting out teachers to come to. What are you saying about this?
The work that we do in the basic education sector is informed by the research that is conducted by universities. They check the standards. Remember, they're institutions of research. They are them who have the repository of knowledge that is used in any system. So they are the ones that develop the curriculum. Of course, we work with them. But what I wanted to say is that we also have our own in-service training, which we do to support our teachers in school.
So why are teachers still not able to teach properly? Why is language still an issue? Why is subject matter and the ability to not just teach a textbook, but actually the entire subject, why is that still an issue?
It is not. It is an issue. It will be an issue forever. We will never find perfection. Even in this newsroom here, you don't have perfect people. That's why ongoing training is something that must happen in any work environment. So we must not say it's a crisis when there are certain people who are not up to the job that they've been appointed to do. All of us need ongoing training. Learning is a lifelong experience. So we identify all these issues, put in place measures. We're training now. We have something called the Teacher Union Collaboration, which is a teacher training institute. All the teacher unions, by the way, they've got their own teacher training institutes where they upgrade and upskill the knowledge of their teachers. So that issue is being addressed in many ways.
Is the department doing enough, Mienke?
We feel not. We feel that they're not doing enough. As I've said before, we don't, and it was mentioned, they don't have to be alone in this. Maybe more collaboration is needed, but we do also need to understand, why this is happening, and the point also is with the budget speed is coming up, for example. So, and education takes the biggest amount of money, right? And
so money isn't the issue, it's what we get for our money.
It's what we get for our money, and we really want to see where does the accountability then lie. And if you have norms and standards that were supposed to be reached by November 2016, but now there's another one in the SONA last year, President Ramaphosa said that by 2022 all the pit latrines would be eradicated, but this year there was no update. So we just worry that by the time we get to February 2022 or December 2022,
the goalpost
will change.
Absolutely.
And it just cannot go on like that.
Sorry about that. We have to cut you. We're going to be looking forward to Minister Motshekga's budget vote speech. Elijah, thank you so very much. Mienke, thank you so much. Up next, we take a look at the stories making headlines in the weekend newspapers. Stay tuned.